Hello, my world history students. This is week 5 of your distance learning. Last week we talked about the Reformation and all its leaders and the different sects of Catholicism that broke away from Christianity. This week we're going to talk about how Christianity came to America. So we're going to do a little segue into American history, a little bit how religion was a main factor of people coming here for religious freedom, so they weren't persecuted for their beliefs back home. So we're going to get right into it with Christianity comes to the Americas. As we've discovered, Christianity split during the Reformation into two sects, Catholicism and Protestantism. Battles were fought and wars were waged to determine the faith of millions of Europeans. But once the fate of Europe had been decided, then what? How could a country not only gain more religious followers, but wealth as well? So those are the two main motivations for most people is money and religious freedom during this time. Explorers had long sought fame and fortune, but many were also tasked to take the word of God to the edges of earth. Explorers such as Christopher Columbus and the encounter of other lands and people were just what the monarchs ordered. Remember how Europe was divided during the Reformation? The southern countries, notably Italy, parts of France, Spain, and Portugal, remained followers of Catholicism. Northern countries such as England, Denmark, Sweden, and Norway became followers of Protestantism. Many other countries were split with followers of both religions. This split not only affected the citizens of those countries, but the people who would come into contact with the explorers. The French and the Spanish, both mostly Catholic nations, were the first nations to travel to America. They were looking to establish two very different things for their homelands, however. Many were seeking profit. They wanted to take the wealth that this new world had to offer. The Spanish sought to conquer and take gold. The French saw more profit in the fur trade. We're going to talk about that up in Canada as well. Likewise, both countries sent missionaries or people sent on religious work to convert the natives of the New World. When Christopher Columbus made his second voyage to North America, he brought Christian priests with him. At the time, he was still convinced he had traveled to the edge of India. He was determined to get rich, finding gold and silks and sending them back to Spain. Spanish missionaries traveled across South and North America, converting natives and claiming lands. Missions were built in Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, Florida, Texas, New Mexico, and California. Francis Cardinal Richelieu said that any American Indian who was converted to Catholicism would be considered a natural Frenchman. While this meant little to the American Indians, it meant the possibility of more citizens for the French. They made an attempt to establish a colony in Florida, but found greater success in Canada and on the rich fur-trapping land along the western slopes of the Appalachian Mountains. Protestant nations such as England and Denmark wanted to make their mark in the Americas too. Explorers representing the Church of England and people trying to flee the control of that church, such as the Pilgrims, made their way to the Americas. What many missionaries failed to understand about conversion to either Catholicism or Protestantism was that the American Indians had their own culture already and religions and were not going to be easily converted to any foreign concept of religion. Makes sense, right? So let's talk about some Spanish missionary customs, okay, and city names. So one way to convert the American Indians to Christianity was to put in place Franciscan priests. Their idea was to build missions to convert, educate, and eventually transform the natives to a European Christian way of life. Missions are more than buildings. They included land for ranching and farming, running water in a forest to provide wood for building, cooking, and heating. People who lived there did everything. They worked, learned, slept, and ate and prayed. While it may sound like a fine place to be, many American Indians, it was more like a prison for them. In California, they were forced to relocate to one of 21 missions spread out along the central and southern coast. At the missions, they were educated, but also forced to work. If they tried to leave, they were hunted down and brought forcibly back. The purpose of the mission was to push Christianity upon the natives. The result was that complete erasure of any trace of the culture they once had. So by converting the American Indians to Christianity, we were basically trying to whitewash and wipe out their culture. Obviously, we weren't successful. Fortunately, we weren't successful. We have American Indian culture still present today, but sometimes there aren't good motivations for what religion does, and most of the time there is, but there also are times when it's not used for good. Missions were connected along a path named El Camino Real, which means Royal Road or the King's Highway in Spanish. Names of the 21 missions are familiar to many Californians. Many of the Golden State's city names were taken from the nearby missions. For example, the first mission, San Diego de Alcala, is where we get the name San Diego. Santa Barbara, Santa Cruz, San Jose, Santa Clara, and San Francisco de Asís all shared their names with the cities that were built around them. That's very interesting. All right, let's talk about a spiritual seed. American meant different things to different people. To the Spanish and the French, it meant an opportunity to collect great wealth. To the Catholics, it meant an opportunity to convert more followers. Some Protestants looked at America as a place to escape religious persecution. To the American Indians, it meant home. When Columbus returned to Spain, the Catholic Spanish had just finished taking the Iberian Peninsula back from the Muslims. His stories of riches and large groups of natives sparked a desire to explore the new encountered lands and lay claim to both its treasures and its peoples. Religion quickly took charge of the exploration. Pope Alexander VI, a Spaniard, divided the New World in half between Spain and Portugal. The Treaty of Tordesillas gave Spain the right to take treasures and convert natives to Catholicism. Within a decade of Columbus's first voyage, Spanish conquistadors, soldiers and sailors were making their way south from the southwestern United States toward Peru. In the Age of Discovery, Spanish explorer Juan Ponce de Leon was the first European to set foot on the North American mainland. His life as an explorer started when he accompanied Columbus on his second voyage to the Americas. Ponce de Leon, that's an awesome name by the way, was the first European to step foot here, but sought additional wealth and fame and began his search for the legendary Fountain of Youth. His travels took him to a land he named Florida. Oh, that makes sense with his name, where he searched in vain for the fountain. In 1521, he left on his second trip with the intention to establish a Spanish colony and spread Christianity to the natives along the west coast of Florida. Unfortunately, this venture failed. In 1537, the Pope believed that all the natives could understand Catholicism and then began a focused push to convert them. Priests soon became part of the exploration. Franciscan priests began exploring and establishing missions in the area of Mexico to establish and educate its natives about Catholicism. In 1565, the Spanish started St. Augustine, Florida, which is the oldest settlement of European origin on the United States mainland. Super cool. Two groups of Protestants known as Puritans arrived in the early 1600s and established some of the first American colonies in New England. And this is what we'll be studying in American history next year. The first group, the Pilgrims, landed in 1620 and sought complete separation from England. They started the Plymouth Colony. The second group, which was much larger, started missionary work in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, New Haven Colony in Rhode Island. They, like the French and Spanish, sought to convert the native people to Christianity. So even when our ancestors from England came to America, they came here for religious freedom. The Puritans started praying towns and encouraged converted natives to live here. Because reading scripture is a pillar of the Protestant faith, missionary John Eliot translated the Bible into the local language. In general, the New England colonies were mostly Puritan. Puritans left England for religious freedom in the Americas, but they showed no tolerance for the practice of other religions. And so you're going to see different colonies had different kinds of religions or different sects of Christianity, okay? You're going to see the Quakers, you're going to see the Mormons, You're going to see the Protestants, Baptists, all different kinds of religion. Religion sparks democracy. The Reformation not only sparked religious freedoms, but it sparked a wave of democracy that would spread across an ocean. When Martin Luther and John Calvin challenged the established ways of the church, it started an uprising. Lutherans, Calvinists, and other Protestants preached that the Bible and faith was all you really needed. This new way of thinking gave followers the freedom to enjoy life and not spend every waking moment trying to get into heaven. Remember, we did away with indulgences or payment into heaven. So now if you were a good person, you can earn your way into heaven. There was no money exchanging for deliverance. But this also sparked fighting. Since Protestantism taught that all were equal in the eyes of God, people asked themselves why they should be devoting their lives to make someone else rich. The Pilgrims aboard the Mayflower were already using democracy as they sought to distance themselves from the King and the Church of England. Once they arrived in America, they agreed that a form of government had to be established if they had any hope of survival. The Mayflower Compact is the name given to this agreement. It was written aboard the ship as it lay off the coast of Cape Cod. And when we start to study government, it was one of the first contracts that made it to North America, one of the first contracts of any of the native people here when they were establishing the colonies. So starting from scratch, we already have a basis for democracy in the colonies. While they still considered themselves subjects of England, they agreed to create laws for the good of the colony. They became the first example of European self-government in North America. The American Indians had been practicing self-government already. So again, it's something that we think we're the first white people there, we think we're the first, we should be doing away with the natives. A lot of things we learned from the natives, they already had. They had a concept of democracy. Their communities were run in a democratic fashion. So we were kind of the babies here and learning from them. They had all the knowledge of planting and the soil and building. And so without them, we probably wouldn't have survived. As the population grew, new towns were added. Attending meetings became too difficult for all to attend. So a few people were sent to represent their group and community. That's a representative democracy. So we'll be learning about that in government as well. It's a different type of democracy. We elect leaders to represent our needs because we can never have a direct democracy. There's too many people in the United States for every single person to have a single say. So we elect people whose values align with ours to represent what we believe in Congress. Sorry, a little segue into government for you. As the population grew, new towns were added. Attending meetings became difficult for everybody, so a few people were sent to represent their community. This, along with ideas from the Iroquois Confederacy, which provided a united council composed of clan and village chiefs, became examples of representative government that was the foundation of our government today. Further south in Virginia, the first elected European government was established. Known as the House of Burgesses, it was set up similar to England's Parliament. House members would meet once a year with the royal governor to discuss laws and other local matters. This type of government meant that they could avoid having to wait for England to make decisions for them. This government was the model for all future English colonies. All right, so I'm going to stop the lesson for today, and we're going to continue in the second video talking more about religion in the colonies. So your assignment is going to be on the Reformation and democracy. So you're going to review a timeline, and you're going to select some important events that you feel are the most important, and you are going to do a little research on them, okay? So you can show us your answers on Wednesday at 9:30 at our Zoom meeting, or you can email me your answers. You guys all have my email address. You can email it to me. Either way, you'll be submitted if you do both assignments for both videos this week to win a $25 gift card. So make sure you get that done. And I hope you guys had fun learning about a little bit about American history this time. And we'll see you next week. Bye.